Hey there, Heather Ho there. It's Jeff Cutter Diamond. Welcome you to yet another Cutter live stream. This is the first one I've done since March, I think. Yeah, since March when I celebrated the 10th anniversary of Target being bit and, Target closing down and then everything else. But today is, of course, Monday, the 19th, 2025. It's supposed to be a very happy day for Leaf fans getting to the third round of the playoffs, aka the NHL semifinals for the first time in 23 years. And what happens? Well, trust me when I say this. I am PISSED off. That the Leafs lost Game 7. Again, the Leafs lose a Game 7. Again, it's heartache. But it seems like every freaking time a Game 7 happens, the Leafs lose it in different ways. From blowing a 3-goal lead in the third period to blowing a third period lead in Boston for the second time to just plumb losing it in 2019 to blowing a 3-1 series lead in a Game 7 to losing at home in a Game 7 with fans, just unlike the other year, to losing a Game 7 in overtime in like 2 minutes, and then you lose Game 7 in a massive blowout, the worst home blowout in a Game 7 in history. Only the Leafs can do that. And boy, it was so bad. Urinating Tree quickly did at least video at like 2 in the morning and posted at 2 in the morning. So like, dude usually takes a day or two, but he did it in breakneck speed. He probably figured it was going to happen, so he had it at the ready. I don't know how Steve Dangle is feeling right now, his podcast and all that stuff. I still have that book. I kind of like his book, but yeah. It's an empty, numb feeling in the world today for Leaf fans, or how many Leaf fans are left. I mean, I can imagine that almost every year there's things. There's death, taxes, and Leaf fans abandoning Toronto to join another team. So the question on everyone's lips will be, what will the Leafs do in the offseason? Well, Mitch Marner is going to probably be on his way out. Pretty good regular season numbers, but the playoffs, he just didn't show up. Austin Matthews didn't really show up. John Tavares kind of showed up. He did okay in a sense. Morgan Riley, not really showed up. Max Domi showed up, and Max Pacioretty actually showed up. So Domi basically, I think, deserves all the love and attention and all that. Matthew Nyes, will he be back? He's a restricted free agent. I think the Leafs might sign him before Marner. Trade Marner away, get some chips, get something, so that the Leafs can rebuild, and we'll see what happens. All that. I'm not completely bitter at the Florida Panthers because, they were the defending Stanley Cup champs. So basically, I got to give them their flowers. Congratulations. And of course, your RJL network for his Panthers winning. I salute you. I have nothing against you. But yeah, the defending Stanley Cup champs, if they lost to an also-ran team, a team that's like also-rans, that would make me pissed off more. But, as a Leaf fan, you got to feel this way. The problem with me is that, it's numb. Like, one of the big things with me is I'm 40 now. I turned 40 this year, and the Leafs have let me down again. In my lifetime, I have seen, how many times? I've seen 4 trips to the Final Four for the Leafs, 4 conference finals end in disaster, and none in 23 years. The last time the Leafs made the Final Four, I was in grade 11. I was in grade 11. I was in high school. I was still living on the farm. I didn't know what my life was going to be like. Since 2002, I graduated high school. I went to college, got a diploma in computer programming, didn't do anything with it, unfortunately. Been working retail pretty much all throughout since 2006, except for a 4-year hiatus, which a lot of combination of factors ruined me, especially my own hand, of course. You know, I picked up friends. I lost friends. I picked up a niece and nephew. I picked up a sister-in-law. Hell, I even picked up a brother-in-law because my sister Christine wasn't married till January 2003. So he's basically there. Yeah, a lot of things have happened since I was born. I mean, this is 2002. What am I thinking? Sorry, this is Live Pal. Yeah, the Jim Ross thing. I like to say, oh, well, I better start all over again. And Jim Ross will pop in saying, we're live, pal. You know, the whole Sid Justice promo. Wrestling terms, you know, a big wrestling guy and all that. So, of course, the big question for me is, am I going to watch the Stanley Cup final? Yeah, I'll watch the Stanley Cup final, but I don't have an invested ability in the Final Four. Like, you know, I'm kind of deflated. I think Florida will for sure take down Carolina because A, Florida has the momentum, and B, Freddie Anderson is a ghost, and he got lucky. You know, New Jersey had the injury problems, and Washington basically overachieves every year. So Carolina's gotten a bit too lucky, but I think Florida will take down Carolina quite easily. And go back to the Stanley Cup Finals and try to do what their state brethren, the Lightning, did and repeat as champions. So anyhow, yeah. And the question on everyone's lips will be, will we see Edmonton, Florida Part 2 this year? Personally, I say no. And it's not any malice towards the Edmonton Oilers or the province of Alberta. It's basically the fact that Jake Ottinger has been a pretty good goalie. Mikko Rantanen has been producing at a high rate. Dallas has gotten through some injuries, but they're fine. And plus, Edmonton's goaltending is a little sus. I know Stuart Skinner did pretty well in the last few games against the Golden Knights, getting, was it back-to-back shutouts or something? But yeah, but you know, you never know what Dallas can throw at you. Dallas probably has a better offense than the Vegas Golden Knights. I should have went to Edmonton, but you know, I kind of felt that Edmonton's goaltending was going to be their problem. But Stuart Skinner produced, and you know, he got a second chance, and he's producing well in a second chance. So yeah, I have a feeling Dallas will take on Florida. I mean, it'll be good for the young Dallas Stars. You know, Rantanen probably winning the Stanley Cup against the Panthers, getting his second Stanley Cup with two different teams. I personally felt that Toronto would have given Carolina fits, win, and get to their first final in 58 years, much less. They haven't won a cup in 58 years, but they haven't even been to the final in 58 years. I mean, the Cubs, when they had that drought from 1945 to 2016, they had a 71-year drought making the final. So by proxy, the Leafs would have to wait till 2038 to make the Cup. So we still have 13 more years. But yeah, the Cubs had gone through that World Series drought. They hadn't been to the finals since 1945 when they did in 2016. They had chances. Like 1984, they should have won the championship, the NL title. They were one game away, but those pesky Padres did it to them. But Detroit crushed the Padres like a paper cup. So a lot of people are like, well, you know, do you blame the goaltending? Well, given that Stolarz was pretty good, and then he got that elbow to the head, Sam Bennett. I'm actually shocked Sam Bennett walked around the ACC in healthy shape. I thought a Leaf was going to take matters into their own paws and go after Sam Bennett. I would have loved to see Sam Bennett be on the ice, and then a Leaf just basically said, fuck it, I'm going to rock Sam Bennett for what he did to Stolarz. It's like an injury just ruins the season. It's like 2021 when John Tavares was decent in the first game of the playoffs against Montreal, and then all of a sudden, fucking Corey Perry with that hit that inadvertently got John Tavares injured. And losing Tavares was hard and all that because, you know, he was our captain. So, yeah, it's just hard to believe and all that. The Leafs just should have had it in the bag. They should have had it. They had Game 7 at home. The fans were there, and they've made up a great effort just to get to Game 7. But the Leafs blew a 2-0 series lead. You know, that's not good and all that. The Leafs were pretty good with keeping 2-0 series leads for the longest time. But not this time. So the Leafs are still the most jinxed team in the NHL. I know I have friends on the Rangers side saying that the Rangers are worse than the Leafs, saying that, oh, we've had one cup in 85 years. You've had plenty of cups in the last 85 years. Yeah, but it's the old adage. What have you done for me lately? I mean, how many times have the Rangers been to the finals since 1967? Let's see. 1972, when Bobby Orr and the Bruins took them out in 6. 1979, when they took out the Islanders in the semifinals and then faced the Habs and could have had the Habs. If it wasn't for Doug Riseborough's practice shot on Buddy the Rock that injured him, Dryden would not probably have played, and maybe Montreal would have been right for the picking. You got 1994 when they won the whole thing, and it took 7 games against the Canucks. They almost blew a 3-1 series lead. And 2014 when they actually should have beaten the LA Kings, but blew multiple goal leads in both games 1 and 2, which were painful losses. And then, of course, game 5 lost to Alfred Martinez's goal. Like, they've been to 4 finals. They've been to as many finals as the Leafs have had conference final. As the Leafs have been to conference finals since I was born in 1985. Well, I guess that's a bad analogy, but whatever. So yeah, the Leafs now still have the longest cup drought and the longest finals drought in the NHL. The question is, how many teams have had a longer playoff drought than the Leafs in the other big 4 sports? Baseball, right now, Cleveland is the oldest team, has the longest drought. They haven't won a World Series since 1948. And they're almost at 8 decades. But unlike the Leafs, they've been to finals. They went to the 1954 final when they got taken out by the New York Giants, like the Giants, and Willie Mays played the catch that year. Cleveland, 1995, they made the final against Atlanta in what they called the politically incorrect World Series because of Indians and Braves. But David Justice hit a home run in Game 6 to win it. 97, they should have taken out those pesky Marlins. But the Marlins pushed it to 7 and won in the 11th inning. In 2016. When they should have had the World Series. They were out 3 games to 1 on the Cubs. It looked like Cleveland was going to win that thing. Well, they would have been buoyed by the fact that their basketball team came back from 3-1 down to win the NBA title. You know, they did what the Cubs did what Cleveland's NBA team did, come back from 3-1 down. So Cleveland's been to 4 finals since their last title. I know that, I think that means the Brewers are the second oldest franchise because I know Texas won. Okay. Yeah, the team since the 60s. The Senators/Rangers won in 2023. The Angels won in 2002. The Expos/Nationals won in 2019. The Padres are tied with the Brewers because the Brewers played the first year in Seattle and then moved to Milwaukee. But yeah, the Padres and Brewers both came in kind of at the same time, so they haven't won a title. Padres 2 finals in 1984 and 1998, and the Brewers 1 final in 1982. So yeah, football, plenty of them. The Super Bowl era was 1967. Well, the Super Bowl started in 1967, January 1967, and then the Leafs 4 months later won the Cup. So yeah, like plenty of teams. Like Cleveland and Detroit are 2 of the oldest franchises, but they haven't had a Super Bowl title, much less an NFL title, for years. Back when the NFL was premier and all that. Cleveland last won a title in 1964, the Browns. They've been to plenty of conference finals, including a spell of 3 and 4 year period. They lost in 86. That was the drive. 87 when they had 86/87, I should say. And then in the next year in Denver, the fumble by Biner, thanks to Jeremiah Castile. And then 2 years later, they went back to Denver and got their butts handed to them by John Elway. But yeah, Cleveland at least made it. Detroit, well, they've been the unluckiest team. But the past few years, they've been pretty good. A lot of people thought Detroit should have made the NFC title game last year, and I think you're right. But Washington sent them packing, and the fans were just upset that Detroit just keeps getting jinxed and all that. Yeah, they've been around since 67 without a title. I think they're the only ones in the Super Bowl era to be born before the Super Bowl era and then to move out of space. As for, well, hockey, Vancouver and Buffalo are tied for the second longest drought. Because the Leafs in 67, but the next team is Vancouver and Buffalo because every one of the 6 expansion teams in 67 at least won one title. The Kings won in 2012 and 14. The North Stars became the Stars and won in 1999. Brett Hull's skating the crease notwithstanding. The Flyers won in 1974 and 75. The Penguins have won several, including back-to-back in the 90s. The St. Louis Blues won the 2019 Cup, and the Golden Seals, well, they technically did because they went to Cleveland. Then Cleveland merged with the North Stars, who begat the Stars, so they got a title. And yeah, and Vancouver, well, they were Vancouver and Buffalo both were in the expansion in 1970. Sabres only been to 2 finals, 75 and 99. And the Canucks have been to 3 finals, 82, 94, and 11. The last 2 ending in riots. So yeah, but at least Toronto has been very classy and not rioted it. But I guess you can't get that far without rioting. Basketball. Well, I know that the Sacramento Kings franchise was once the Rochester Royals, and they won the 1951 NBA title back when the NBA was not as big nationally as it is now. Like, they've been around since, and they have had a drought since 1951. I think the only team since 1967, before 1967, to blow it. Hang on. Franchise postseason droughts. Title droughts. Oh, Atlanta, the Hawks. The Hawks franchise, 1958, have had the drought. So the Hawks, well, they were the St. Louis Hawks in 1958, won the title, and then they were the last title. They were the last team till 1967 to win the title and not be named the Boston Celtics. So the Hawks haven't won a title since 1958. The Suns are the third longest. They were franchised in 1968, but they haven't won a title since. They've been to what, 2 finals? 3 finals. 76, 93, and 2021. Yeah, 76 was in the Celtics, including losing that triple overtime game, that famous game that Gar Hurd made that bucket to force triple overtime in the first place. 93, MJ took down Barkley and with John Paxson's 3-pointer. And 2021 when Giannis and the Bucks took care of them. Yeah, so the Suns are the third longest drought. The Clippers are the 4th longest drought. For how cursed the Clippers are, they're the 4th longest NBA drought. The Kings, the Hawks, and the Suns have them beat. Wow, that's pretty good. For the NBA, for the NFL, for Super Bowl droughts. Oh, yeah. The Lions don't even have the longest drought. It's the Arizona. So 6 teams have not won an NFL title / Super Bowl before the Leafs. The Cardinals, 1947, they went to the championship. They won the title in 1947, lost the next year in the snow in Philly, and have only went to 1 final since. That was Super Bowl 43 against the Steelers, one of the classics. The Cardinals should have had it, but that toe tap by Santonio Holmes. The Lions, 1957. The Titans haven't won a title since 1961 when they were the Houston Oilers in the AFL. Yeah, that's kind of makes sense. Yeah, Tennessee, Houston should have had a great run in the 90s. 93, they lost in the greatest postseason comeback of all time. And in 94, they had 14 wins. They had an 11-game winning streak. They were looking pretty good. And then all of a sudden, Joe Montana and the Chiefs ruined them. The Chargers, 1963 AFL championship. Oh, yeah. The Chargers haven't won anything since the AFL in 1963. You know, they went to San Diego. Air Coryell was supposed to win a title, but they couldn't get to the finals. They've only been to one final as a franchise in Super Bowl 1995 when they shocked the Steelers in Pittsburgh and then went to face the Niners. And then Cleveland, number 5. Buffalo, 1965 AFL title. I don't need to tell you that 4 straight Super Bowl appearances just fucking ruined them. They just couldn't do it. Okay, NFL. Baseball. Baseball, longest championship droughts. Cleveland, Milwaukee's number 2, San Diego's number 3, Seattle, 1977. When they were franchise number 4. So yeah, so Milwaukee and San Diego technically tied. That's what I thought. And the NHL and their droughts. And look up droughts. Leafs, Sabres, Canucks, Flyers are number 4, 1975. But they've been to 6 finals since 1975. The Flyers of all teams. 76 when they were going for the 3-peat, but the Habs beat them, bust them. That's their custom in a sweep. 1980, they had that 35-game unbeaten streak, and all they got was a 6-game loss to the upstart Islanders. 1985, when Gretzky and Curry were scoring points left, right, and center. 1987, they went back with a rookie Ron Hextall. Came back from 3-1 to force game 7. 97, when they got swept by the Red Wings, and Darren McCarty's goal will always be epic. And 2010, when Patrick Kane won in overtime. So now you know. So now you know about this, like how many teams have had droughts prior to 1967, like longer than the Leafs. And I believe it is, 1 in the NHL. I mean, 0 in the NHL, obviously. 1 in baseball, that's Cleveland. 2 in basketball, the Hawks and the Kings, and 7 in the NFL. So that's 10. So yeah, so 10 franchises have had longer droughts than the Leafs. Only 10 out of the 126, I like to say. I think so. Yeah. No, sorry, 124, because hockey has 32, football has 32, but basketball and baseball only have 30. So it's 120. That's 124. So yeah. So the Leafs have the 11th longest drought out of the 124 teams. That's actually pretty good. They're not in the top 10. Anyway, but regardless of that, yeah. So, that's what I feel like. Feel like crap. So I'm going to be doing a lot of Leaf videos. Probably tomorrow I'll be taping some Leaf stuff and all that. I did tape a few what ifs, but not Leafs what ifs. Once Toronto gets added onto that list, gets into that poll, then that's different. But yeah. All right. So I wrote down I ranked the 8 times that the Leafs have lost a winner-take-all game in the playoffs, and ranked them on how much it hurts by the Cutter Index. Now, do note that one of them actually is not a technical everything. There are 7 game 7s, but there is one that is not a game 7 because of the COVID year. The NHL decided to do a 5-game preliminary round. So technically, because it was a do or die game, that counts. So here's my list from 8 to 1. 8 being the least painful and 1 being the most painful. All right. Number 8 on the list is 2019, losing to the Bruins. I couldn't really find anything like super bad about them. Maybe they did blow 1 goal lead in the third period, but I don't think they really had much of a momentum in Game 7 against the Bruins in 2019. I know I was over at my buddy Bill's place and all that, and then once the Leafs lost off the couch. I went plop in shock. Number 7 is 2022, losing at home to Tampa in Game 7. Now, Tampa were the two-time defending champs, and the Leafs just couldn't produce offensively. They had a decent show, but Tyler freaking Johnson just had to come out of nowhere and be the hero. Or was it? No, it wasn't him. It wasn't Sorelli. It was someone else who was kind of unknown. I don't know. I forgot who. Carter? No. I was supposed to say Ryan Carter. No, but the Leafs sucked. Of course, it was a double loss for me. That was the night of my ball hockey tournament, and we sucked that year. And of course, I would suffer another loss as that same night, my orange and white cat Tink passed at 21 years old. So, that was horrible. Number 6 is 2018 with the third period choke. You'd be thinking, well, that's too low. Technically, no, because things were different. So, yeah, the Leafs had a 2-goal lead headed into the third period in Boston. It looked like the Leafs had the momentum and we're going to move on to the next round. But, oh, no, they botched it early in the third period and never looked back. And that was just terrible. Number 5 is the 2020 loss to the Jackets. That's the one example that I did not include in the tops at Game 7. Sure, we lost 7 Game 7s, but this is winner take all because this was the season COVID hit, and the league decided to have playoff series and would make it a best of 5 preliminary round series. The top 4 teams in each conference would get byes. They would play a round robin among themselves to determine 1, 2, 3, and 4. And then the other ones, based off of points percentage, would be ranked. The Leafs ended up facing the Jackets. I think it was the 8-9 game series. But that series was huge because the Leafs choked a 3-goal lead in Game 3 and lost that game. And then Columbus did the same in Game 4, and the Leafs did it. So they traded those. And then Game 5, winner take all, the Leafs just disappeared. And Columbus got in to face Tampa. And then the next Columbus game was that quintuple overtime thriller. Okay, number 4 on the list was last year's overtime loss. Last year's Game 7 loss to Boston. Last year's. The Leafs at least were making it interesting. They were down 3-1. They won Game 5 in overtime in Boston. They won Game 6 at home. And then Game 7, what's going to be on Saturday, the same day as my poker event, which I took 3rd place in, which was great. But unfortunately, we lost Game 7 in overtime. It was just shocking. And then, how the Leafs didn't react to the dump-in in the first 2 minutes. And then all alone, the goal scored. Pasternak scored all alone, and the Leafs were out of the playoffs. Joseph Woll had played his heart out, but then he got hurt before Game 7, and everyone thought that was a sign of the times, and it was. So practically, yeah, the overtime losses always sting in a Game 7. Ask the St. Louis Blues fans this year. Number 3 was this year's choke job to the Panthers. Thinking it's number 1 because it's the worst Game 7 performance by a home team in history. Well, you could say that, but the other 2 were just more diabolical, if you ask me. When you look at things, it's that the Leafs were up 2-0 in the series. It looked good. It was like, okay, then split in Florida. You're up 3-1. See what happens. Maybe lose and maybe win in Game 5 or win Game 6. Don't go to Game 7. And lo and behold, it didn't happen. Florida won the next 3 games. The Leafs won Game 6 in Florida 2-0. It was like, here we go. We're on a momentum swing. And it was 0-0 after 1 period. And then the ref took that damn stick under his eye. It was gruesome. I nearly lost my snacks with that. And then all of a freaking sudden, the Panthers poured it on 6-1. Jerseys on the ice. Toronto Maple Leafs tradition. But at least we don't riot like Vancouver. But yeah, just pure stupid. And maybe Stolarz, if he was healthy enough, maybe would have played Game 7 or maybe came back and then, just as well would not have to feel so bad. And maybe if we lose Steelers, we lose Steelers. Big deal. Number 2 is 2021 when the Leafs choked the series to the Montreal Canadiens. The fact of the matter is that it was painful, very painful. I mean, when you're up 3-1, you have to finish it off, no matter what. We hear all the horror stories about many teams blowing 3-1 leads or coming back from 3-1 leads. But in Toronto, this franchise never had a 3-1 lead prior to 21 before 1987. The last time the Leafs were up 3-1 in the series when they did in 2021 against the Habs was 1987. And I was only 2 years old. And that was when the Leafs in the second round or the division finals were up 3-1 on the Detroit Red Wings and 1 win away from going to the Stanley Cup semifinals against Edmonton. Big mistake. They lost the next 3 games. Glenn Hanlon played lights out hockey with a pair of shutouts. Painful. So yeah, 2021 was huge because that was the season in which they went through the 4 divisions and all that. But the divisions were kind of different because for the Leafs, they played every one of the other 6 Canadian teams. So usually you obviously don't have all 7 Canadian teams in the same division. Vancouver, Calgary, Edmonton, and Winnipeg are in the different conference than Toronto, Ottawa, and Montreal. But yeah, they paired it up. All because Canada refused to let people cross the border and all that. So what ends up happening is that, because of the travel restrictions, the Canadian teams could not go to the States and all that. So what they did was set up divisional playoffs, and a Canadian team could face an American team only in the Final Four. And of course, restrictions have to be done. Yeah. So the Leafs were the best team of the Canadian squads. They took on Montreal, who just snuck in ahead of, I think, Calgary. But yeah, Leaf fans were happy because, Canadians are a hater rival, and we last faced them in a playoff series in 1979 and got swept by them. Larry Robinson, former Kitchener Ranger, with the overtime dagger. But the fact of the matter is that, it was just not fun and all that. Just not fun. So, yeah, up 3-1, lost game 1, thanks to Paul Byron's acrobatic goal, which I admit was fantastic. We won the next 3 games, and then in game 5 in overtime, Galchenyuk, we had him, and then he ended up passing the puck to a Montreal Canadian player. He probably forgot what team he played for, and then they scored to make it a game 6 in Montreal. And then fans were allowed in Montreal, just like a few thousand fans. And then practically those fans helped Montreal out. Toronto had the momentum in game 6 overtime, and it looked like the jinx was over for the Leafs making it to the second round. But then all of a sudden we couldn't do it. We lost in overtime, and then game 7 happened. And that's just pure bad luck. So anyway, yeah, that was a choke job. And number 1, nothing can compare to the first game 7 of that drought, 2013. Nothing can compare to that. So the story of the 2013 Leafs was that, it was a strike-shortened season because of a lockout, and then the Leafs just got lucky and all that and made it to the playoffs for the first time since the full lockout of 2005. The Leafs, I believe at the time, were the second last team to make the playoffs. Well, after the lockout, the 2005 full season lockout, I think Florida was the only other team. Or was it Edmonton? No, obviously not Edmonton, but yeah. No, Florida beat us to it. That's right, because in 2012. Nevertheless, the Leafs, 2013, great times by all, but then all the effing sudden, the Leafs just choked it away. And, well, the Leafs were down 3-1. Everyone thought that Boston would have Toronto's stuff. It could have been different because if the Bruins had beaten the Senators on the final day of the schedule, then the Leafs would have played the Habs and it would have been Bruins Sens. But no, it wasn't. It was Leafs Bruins. Bruins were up 3-1. Leaf fans were not so sure. And then a pair of wins, including we didn't win in overtime. But anyway, the Leafs were now going to game 7 on a Monday on a Monday night, the same night as the Rangers taking on the Caps in Game 7. I was watching Rangers Caps Game 7 because I was invested in that one, and I had a funny feeling the Leafs were going to lose. Rangers crushed Washington 5-0, so I decided to change channels to the Leafs Bruins. Leafs were up 4-2, and I'm thinking, okay, great. Leafs are going to pull a rabbit out of the hat and come back from 3-1 down. No, it's so fast. They give up 2 goals in the last minute, 4-4, and then Bergeron in overtime. Game over, Leafs lose and become the first team to blow a 3-goal lead in the third period in a Game 7 in a winner-take-all game. The simple fact was that it was just not meant to be and all that. And, you know, that was just painful. That's very painful. I mean, when you blow a 3-goal lead in a Game 7, you know, you don't deserve to move on and all that. So anyway, that's my ranking of the top Game 7s and all that. The most painful, the least painful to the most painful. I really don't have much to say because I've got videos to work on, video ideas. So basically, I'll let those speak for themselves. And nobody joined my stream at all, well, live. But just a reminder, you can comment on my stream. You can say stuff. I of course get the notifications that you commented, and then I'll respond to your comments and all that best I can. So yeah, I got Leaf videos to worry about for making tomorrow. I will have time tomorrow because after work I'll be back doing the stuff, and then I'll be putting I'll prioritize the Leaf crap. So anyway, I've taken up a lot of your time, 35 minutes. So yeah, thanks for watching. I'm Jeff Diamond. Adieu. And go Leafs go. Sadly.